Deliver the talk next week. She said she didn't want to deliver today, so okay. So be it. Enjoy. Oftentimes we hear that as one word, E-N-J-O-Y. I prefer to think of it as two words, I-N-J-O-Y, even when I use it in the context of enjoy. Enjoy is a state that we have the option of achieving. It's part of our process that we have the ability to stimulate and live within that context of joy. Okay, could you give me a glass of water, please? Mark is suffering from a cold. He's the normal deliverer of the glass of water here, so. I know it's coming. I know it's coming. It is coming. All right. Thank you. There's one. Oh, yeah. Thank you. I think I'm okay with this. We'll see. So in Unity, we celebrate the Advent season with the 4 words of faith, peace, love, and joy. And the idea is that we are prefacing the arrival of the Christ consciousness within us, the birth of the Christ, if you will, with the states of, I suppose we could call them states of consciousness. Faith that indeed we can have the experience of the birth of the Christ within us. Peace that in order to allow that to arise, it is important that we be in a situation, in a consciousness of peace. Love as a preface, not as an emotion, but rather as a state of consciousness. And then joy. Well, it's interesting that we have many opportunities to sabotage our experience of joy. Can you think of any that you can offer to us? I saw Chris, yes. It wasn't what oh boy, that's a big one. Boom! Anything else? Rachel? Why is he acting that way? He could be acting much more congenially. He could be. He doesn't have to be stupid, right? Anything else? Well, anytime we have conflict, right? Anytime we encourage conflict, anytime we respond to conflict with conflict, we are blocking our experience of joy. Anything else? This is something that we have the choice of engaging. Now, we have Merriam-Webster has done us a great service providing us with definitions for the various words we use. And in Merriam-Webster, we see that joy is the emotion evoked by well-being, success, or good fortune, or by the prospect of possessing what one desires, delight, or the expression or exhibition of such emotion, gaiety, or a state of happiness or felicity, bliss. To me, that falls short. When I think of joy, certainly those things apply when I'm thinking of joy, but there is a sense of connectedness. There's a sense of camaraderie. There's a sense of being with the all that is all. I mean, with all of creation. And this concept of joy as related to well-being, or related to getting what we desire, or related to bliss. Well, bliss is perhaps as close to it as I'm thinking, but this idea of connectedness seems to me to be an important part of our experience of joy. And the interesting thing is that this expansive feeling is, in my mind, a preamble to the birth of the Christ consciousness. It is hard for me to imagine that we could have that experience of Christ consciousness in a state of separation, in a state of that out there and me being separate. So the birth of the Christ consciousness for me requires this experience of connectedness. Do you deserve joy? Why was there hesitation? Did you have to think about that? I think that we intellectually respond to, yes, I deserve joy, but our activities and our thoughts are not of that opinion. Our activities and thoughts do not necessarily jibe with this declaration that I deserve joy. I deserve joy right now. I demand joy right now. Oh, no, you don't. That's not in your DNA. Your family's never appreciated joy, never experienced joy. You grew up in a household where there was no laughter, and whatever those excuses are, or those assumptions are that keep us from really understanding at the core of our being that we deserve joy. Those blocks, those obstacles, are something that they're of our own choosing, right? They're of our own manufacture. We don't need to accept those as being reasonable or acceptable. A research psychologist, Shawn Achor, perhaps you have heard of the book, The Happiness Advantage. Have you heard of The Happiness Advantage? Shawn Achor wrote The Happiness Advantage, and in his research, he was looking at a whole spectrum of studies that have been undertaken over the course of the last 40 or 50 years. It was actually in the 60s when positive psychology became a thing. Previously, psychology was the study of adverse conditions, of anomalies, of psychoses, and so on. But in the 60s, there arose this movement of studying the psychology of happiness. And Shawn Achor, I guess his book was in the late 90s or early 2000s. He wrote about several studies. He says, positive emotions flood our brains with dopamine and serotonin, chemicals that not only make us feel good, but dial up the learning centers of our brains to higher levels. They help us organize new information, keep that information in the brain longer, and retrieve it faster later on. And they enable us to make and sustain more neural connections, which allows us to think more quickly and creatively, become more skilled at complex analysis and problem solving, and see and invent new ways of doing things. Wow, that's kind of cool, right? Two chemicals, dopamine and serotonin, create an environment in brain chemistry that stimulates all of these positive effects. So why don't we choose joy as a normal course? Why don't we look for opportunities to enhance our joy? Back to that idea that I don't deserve joy, or I don't know how to get to joy because the conditions out there are so adverse, they're so disturbing, they're so whatever, challenging, that I can't get to that state of joy. And the interesting thing is that the state of joy is dependent upon serotonin and dopamine, not dependent upon what your neighbor says or how the policeman responded to the fact that you were in a hurry to get somewhere or whatever. The state of joy is really dependent only upon what's going on within us. And what's going on within us are thoughts. The thoughts, here's the interesting thing. You know, thoughts are an ephemeral thing, right? I mean, I have this thought. I convert it into words. I express those words. You hear those words. You interpret those words. And now the ephemeral thought that I had now exists within you. And having that thought within you allows your brain to respond in a number of different ways, either from fear or anger or from gaiety, joy, happiness. And it's all this ephemeral thing called a thought that I have transmitted, whether it was accurately transmitted or not, whether or not you are thinking what I thought is really a question, right? It's not assured that when I express what I am thinking, that I am expressing it accurately. How many times have you come to the point of saying something and say, oh, that's not what I meant. Let me try again, right? So this passage of this ephemeral thing called a thought is a great mystery. It's the root of the connection between consciousness and matter. But nonetheless, we have the power to stimulate a thought that is positive regardless of what's going on out there. I was expressing to my grandson yesterday. My grandson went out to a skate park yesterday. He and his dad and a friend of his went out to a skate park, the Apex skate park up here on 72nd. And he ended up breaking his arm. Well, before I left to come down to the board meeting, I knew that he was getting his skateboard together. And I said, so do you have your wrist guards? And he said, oh, no, I don't use wrist guards. Well, last night, I said, Troy, you know, when you get your cast on, he's in a splint right now. They're going to get a cast on tomorrow, I think. I said, when you get your cast on, I want to sign it. And you know what I want to write on your cast? I want to write on your cast that this is an after-the-fact wrist guard. He smiled. I don't think he thought that was funny, but he smiled anyway. That was nice, you know. Oh, Grandpa, leave me alone. So we have this idea that this thought transmitted to another person, that thought can then be a basis of their stimulation of dopamine and serotonin. Shawn goes on in this section. He says, we even quite literally see more of what's around us when we're feeling happy. A recent University of Toronto study found that our mood can actually change how our visual cortex, the part of the brain responsible for sight, processes information. In this experiment, people were primed for either positivity or negativity, then asked to look at a series of pictures. Those who were in a negative mood didn't process all of the images in the pictures, missing substantial parts of the background, while those in a good mood saw everything. Eye tracking experiments have shown the same thing. Positive emotions actually expand our peripheral line of vision. Now, they have done experiments at various age groups They had a study involving 4-year-old kids that were given the test of putting a set of blocks together in a particular pattern. And they had 3 groups. One group was given in this study it was 2 groups. One group was given no instructions other than here's what you're attempting to do. And the second group was asked to think of something that they were happy about. And, whatever that was, each child was given the opportunity to think their own happy thoughts. And they found that the kids that were not given that request to think a happy thought, they put this puzzle together. But the ones that were primed with a happy thought did it much more quickly. A study that was done with college students. They were given a standardized math test. And they were then shown some videos. A video that, for one group, it was a video that was a negative set of emotions, fear, something of that sort. The second group was shown positive, happy video. Something that was stimulating and exciting and left a positive impression. And the ones who were experiencing the negative video, they didn't do as well as the ones who witnessed the positive video. Same standardized math test, same preparation, that is the same period of preparation. One was a negative video, the other was a positive video. A group of doctors in their in a diagnosis class in medical school, they were again neutral and positive, where they were going through a set of make-believe diagnoses or make-believe symptoms to diagnose a patient. And those that were not given any positive reinforcement before the fact, they did okay. But the doctors that were given a positive reinforcement before the analysis did much better. They identified the symptoms they identified the maladies more quickly and more correctly. The interesting thing was that in this study, the positive reinforcement was a piece of candy. But they didn't give the piece of candy to the medical students before they actually did the diagnosis. They were just promised a piece of candy because they didn't want to have blood sugar to be a basis for that greater thinking ability, right? But it was just these were medical students. It was just the promise of a piece of candy that put them into a better frame of mind to allow them to be more creative in their diagnoses. The mood can actually change how our visual cortex processes information. It changes how we are able to look at a situation more completely, considering aspects of the situation that we might otherwise have not seen. Think about this. Think about the power of this. You have the ability in and of yourself to think happy thoughts. Right? We've always heard, don't worry, be happy, right? I used to sing that song as I was going through some very adverse financial conditions in my life. Out came this song, Don't Worry, Be Happy. I played it on, I recorded it on one side of the tape, time and time again, right? Used up the whole tape. I flipped the tape over, filled the whole tape so that when I got in the car, I could just pop the tape in and it would continually play this song. Now, you may consider that this is the reason why I am insane, but the reality is that song made me happy. And it was a choice that I made. I'm going to think happy thoughts. I'm going to listen to this song over and over and over everywhere I went. That went on for 2 or 3 months. And yeah, I was in a more responsive, reactive space. I was able to look up at things, I'm sure, based upon this study, that, I didn't do an A/B test, right? I didn't have the opportunity to live that series of events and circumstances in a negative state versus a positive state. I lived through that negative set of circumstances in a positive state by my own choice. But the point is that we have the opportunity to make this conscious, intentional effort to change the way we approach our day-to-day. So this priming is an important aspect of cueing us to happiness. Take a look at Luke 2, 8 through 11. In that region, this was the story of the birth, right? The advent of the birth. And in that region there were shepherds living in the fields, keeping watch over their flock by night. Then an angel of the Lord stood before them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them. And they were terrified. But the angel said to them, "Do not be afraid, for see, I am bringing you good news of great joy for all the people. To you is born this day in the city of David a Savior, who is the Messiah, the Lord." Now we can look upon this and we can say, well, that's an interesting myth, or that's an interesting piece of history, however we want to approach this story. Or we can look at that and say, oh, I see. Aha. What that's telling me is that I have the opportunity right here and now to experience the realization that the birth of the Christ consciousness within me is coming. It's here. All I have to do is choose so, right? So the angel is talking to the shepherds. The angel is talking to the shepherd. Now, metaphysically, sheep are considered thoughts. There's not good sheep and bad sheep. There's just sheep, right? And thoughts. There's not good thoughts and bad thoughts. There are positive thoughts and there are negative thoughts. There are progressive and constructive thoughts, and then there are destructive and obstructive thoughts. But the point is that these thoughts are not good or bad. They're just either effective or ineffective. Not ineffective, but they're either contributing to this level of joy, or they are not contributing to the level of joy. And so from a metaphysical perspective, the angel speaking to the shepherd of thoughts, who's the shepherd of thoughts in your life? Yeah, right? Each of us is our own shepherd of thoughts. And so here we have this apparition saying to us, behold, the reaction may be fear. We may look upon a circumstance and say, oh boy, that is really a fearful circumstance. Or we can look upon the circumstance and say, oh, well, that's interesting. It is what it is. Now how do I respond to it? If I respond to it with the thought that I have within me all of the resources that I need. I have within me the connection to the divine. I have within me everything I need to address this situation in the most effective way possible. Then I will be more effective in addressing that situation. Would you not agree? And that's the point of Shawn Achor's book, is that if we prime ourselves for happiness, if we prime ourselves for joy, we are going to be more successful. Our relationships are going to be more effective. Our progress in our career is going to be better. Our ability to respond to the circumstances that come up in our lives is going to be more effective. That's the whole point. So as we look at this opportunity to experience joy in our lives, we will then open up the opportunity for that Christ consciousness to arise. It's already there. It's already present. All you have to do is get out of the way. All you have to do is prime yourself to be willing to accept this glorious experience of the Christ arising within you. That is really the story of the birth of Christ. That's really the Christmas story in its essence. We have the choice. And if we are willing to take that opportunity, what we do is we start looking for circumstances out there which can give us joy. Instead of looking at the, oh my God, look at the, oh my God. What a difference intonation makes, right? And all it is just a fluctuation. It's an adaptation of our voice. That's the point, is that it's just an adaptation of our thoughts, regardless of the circumstances. We have the ability to see what we choose to see. And if we choose to see the positive, if we choose to see the affirmative, if we choose to see the glory of our experience, whatever the experience is, if we see the reflection of God in that experience, we are primed to have a Christmas arising within us. Any time of year. It may be on the 25th of December. It may be on the 3rd of January. It may be on the 15th of July. Any time of year, we can have this arising of Christ consciousness. But we must be willing. We must recognize we deserve it, and we must be willing to accept it. We'll have our meditation. As we come into we're standing on holy ground. It is a sacred time because it is in this moment that we can choose the Christ light. It is in this moment that we can choose connectedness. In this moment, we can choose peace, love, joy. Acknowledge for yourself that truly you do have this choice right now. And having acknowledged that, you open yourself up for the experience of peace, love, and joy. So let's take a little trip. Take a trip into the past to find an experience that seemed to be fearful, unloving, perhaps even shameful. It's your experience. You choose. You don't need to share it with anyone. But in this process, bring that experience to mind. And allow that experience to be devoid of any emotion that you had attached to it. Just look at the experience itself. Who was involved? What was said or what was done? What effects came out of that experience? Just look at the experience itself. And now ask yourself, what have I learned? What did that experience provide for me? How did I grow from that experience? See the experience as a classroom, a lesson. See the other players in that experience as your teachers. Embrace those others that were in that experience, including yourself. Embrace them in love, regardless of what they said, regardless of what they did, regardless of how you reacted, regardless of the outcome. Just embrace those in that experience with love, including yourself. See them as the messengers of God. Not that you agree with it, not that you appreciated it, not that you allowed it to be as it was at the time, but just see them as the messenger of God, bringing to you the message that even in this situation, I can love. Even in this situation, I can have peace. Even in this situation, joy can fill me. I can look upon this teacher of God with love. I can look upon this experience with joy. Because right now I choose that. Now come back into this present moment and consider that in this moment, various situations may arise. They may appear to be adverse situations. They may appear to be difficulties. They may appear to be obstacles to your achieving that light of the Christ. But recognize also that that is just your choice, and you can choose differently. You can see this adverse circumstance as an opportunity to learn. You can look upon that situation as your spiritual gymnasium, where you're called to do some weightlifting, where you're called to run an extra mile, where you're called to engage a level of patience that would be heroic. Realize that you are empowered to be the Christ in any given moment, because you are the harbor of the Christ in every moment. I'd like you to repeat after me. I am empowered to be the Christ right now. I am empowered to be the Christ right now. Again, I am empowered to be the Christ right now. And one more time. I am empowered to be the Christ right now. breathe into that affirmation. Let that affirmation be readily available to you. Practice that affirmation as you're driving, as you're shopping, as you're resting, perhaps even as you're going to sleep at night. I am empowered to be the Christ right now. Breathing in and breathing out. I am empowered to be the Christ right now. And as we come back into this time and space, let us come back sharing the words of the Lord's Prayer. Offering for unity now. As we take our offerings in our hands, let us bless them with this offering statement. Together, please. Divine love, through me, blesses and multiplies all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. I give in love because I trust in God. And once again, Trinity Damask and irreverence.
I wanted to add a new holiday tune this year.